Hello and welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the fictional worlds in which certain stories and narratives are set and the rules within them, what exists and what doesn't exist and what does exist but it doesn't really matter, and all those things. Very recently I watched A Brief Encounter at the new Wolsey Theatre and I have my trusty notes here. It was directed by Doug Rintoul, and I saw it. Didn't know when I saw it. A couple of weeks ago. I saw it with a couple of my friends. And I didn't know anything about the storyline, didn't know anything about the show, but while I was watching it, I was just like, oh my goodness, isn't this the most delightful thing ever? Like, just so nice. Don't know if people would be offended if I use the word nice to describe their work, but like, when something's just so like sweet and lovely and wholesome. It reminded me of Gilmore Girls. So Gilmore Girls is my comfort TV show. If I'm feeling anxious, if things, are a bit, I don't know what the word is, uncertain, I'll just zone in and watch Gilmore Girls. And that's how I felt watching it. I just kept thinking, oh my god, this is so delightful. It was so lovely. And there were some things that happened within it that I found super interesting and super thought provoking. And I've had a couple of conversations with few different people afterwards that I'm going to get into in a minute. First of all, I'm going to explain. So, this is a Rosy May Uncut episode, but it's the first one ever to exist with my face in it. Now, what makes it uncut is, touch wood, I will be recording this whole episode and I won't be making any edits. So if I say the wrong thing, it's got to stay in. If I stutter, if the doorbell goes off, all these things, no editing. So if I say something that maybe isn't the most well thought out, it's because I'm just going blah 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 straight into your phone or your computer. So I hope that's okay with you. So, and there's other podcast episodes you can listen to, but you ain't got this in, so you probably want to stay here if you like watching my face. So, looking at my notes, what I wanted to talk about is, I've said that bit about fictional worlds and the rules that exist. So before I go on to talk about A Brief Encounter, I wanted to talk about a couple of other things that I've seen, including A Small Island, which is a play. It was a book and then a play, I think, about this. What is it about? This woman comes from. Is she a woman or a girl? I think she's a woman. Comes over from Jamaica, and that's not how the story goes. Oh my goodness. No, a man. It's in the war. A man comes over from Jamaica, and then he sends for his wife, and she comes over from the Jamaica, from the small island, and it's just about how they negotiate life during the war, coming from Jamaica and living in England. That's all you need to know. So here are some rules, okay? So in Small Island, time travel, not a thing. It's not a rule. It does not exist in this world. Whether you're reading the book, whether you're reading the play, time travel, not a thing. Gravity, very much a thing. This play and this story is very truthful, in my opinion, particularly for me, as it tells the truth of my history and my story. But it's very truthful. Gravity exists, time travel doesn't exist. You get where I'm going with this? Going to somewhere else, Aladdin, particularly one or both of the Disney versions, okay? Gravity does exist, but also sometimes doesn't exist with like the flying carpets and stuff. But like, it exists in the world. It's not a theme. No one talks about gravity, but everyone is aware that it's there. Or are they aware? Probably. Time travel, I think, does exist in this world. It really does exist because you could wish on a genie or with a genie. I want to go back in time. Cool. I think that's a rule that can happen. It's not really a theme. I don't know. Can't really remember the storyline, but you get me. Racism. Based on where Aladdin is set and the people and the characters in the storyline, I don't think racism exists because I don't know why it would exist. Okay? Now, racism exists in the creation of Disney's version of Aladdin and creating the films. Definitely racism exists in the creative. But actually within the world in which Disney's Aladdin exists, correct me if you think I'm wrong, I don't think racism exists, because why should racism exist there? Because they're all one and the same and there's no other. I don't know. It just doesn't seem like it exists, but maybe it does. But I'm probably a bad example because I haven't watched it in ages. But that's where I'm going with it. Okay, back to my notes. So in Small Island, racism does exist, and it's a big theme of the show. So, like, one of the themes of the show is how white British people are coping with how they're dealing with having, I was going to say Jamaicans, but also people from the Caribbean, but also black people from America, and that their reactions to that, and how those black and brown people are coping with like white British attitudes and like the things that they're saying, and that's a big thing. Everyone's aware of it. What else is there? Sexism, I think, is a thing. I mean, I think it exists. I think it's a theme because there's like certain jobs that the women can do, and there's certain things that the women have to do, and the men go off to war, and it's set in our reality. It exists in this world. I've read the play, I've read the play, and I also watched it at the National Theatre this year, last year, I don't know. Leonie from Call the Midwife, the Caribbean actress in there, was a Caribbean actress in Small Island. And fun fact, she's like almost my cousin, or is my cousin, but I don't think she knows that. So just don't tell her, because I don't think she knows who I am. Anyway, so that is my frame of reference, watching it at the National Theatre. I keep doing this. This is my world. Okay? So it's a very truthful thing. It's a very truthful world. So sexism does exist because it exists in society. Maybe it's not explicitly said, but it's like there. What else was there? I feel like colorism was a theme. Back in Jamaica, I'm sure, I don't know if it was like, oh, you go to this place and you can do XYZ because of your pale brown skin, but you go over there because of your dark brown skin. You work as a maid or a servant, and you can be brought up as a lady of the house. But maybe I'm making that up. But I'm sure colorism was a thing. So that's Small Island. And going back to Aladdin, I think sexism was a theme. There are the sex workers, and there are like the rules that the men have to do and the women have to do, and like sexism is just in society in Aladdin. Okay, and classism, definitely there. Aladdin's poor, Jasmine's rich. There's everything in between, and you get to see how the different classes relate to each other, interact with each other, and it's a big part of what's going on. Ableism in Aladdin, I don't even know why I wrote it down because I couldn't tell you. It's not something that springs to mind as something that does or doesn't happen, but ableism is like so ingrained in society that probably some of the language used may have like come from ableist backgrounds. I don't know. We'll leave a question mark for that one. That's what I did. And now you get to see behind the scenes. I go and check if the camera's still running. Yeah, it is. Just because I get a bit paranoid that it stops working. Okay, so going back to A Brief Encounter, like the thing that I went and the thing that I went to see that made me want to make this video. So, in this world of this particular version of Brief Encounter that I saw 2 weeks ago at the new Wolsey Theatre, directed by Doug and all those people, okay? It's the version I'm talking about. In this world, sexism, I've put a tick, it did exist. I've put a cross that it wasn't a theme. And it depends how you interpret it. I think sexism existed in that there were women in the, what are they called? Service industry roles. There was the woman who would go out to lunch on a Thursday, presumably while her husband is working, or maybe they're just so rich that they don't need to work. Haven't figured that one out. But there's like different gender roles that people fall into and align with. So sexism exists in this world. And you know, sexism exists in this world. Why wouldn't it exist in this world if this is like a truthful telling? But it's just kind of like undercurrent, just generally there. Homophobia. I put some question marks. It was a very heterosexual world. All the romantic relationships were heterosexual. It doesn't mean that what's the word I'm saying? It doesn't mean that homosexual relationships and other types of relationships didn't exist in this world, but we didn't, my binoculars, we didn't see it on stage in the time that we were there. We didn't see any of that. But it doesn't mean it wasn't there. But does that mean that homophobia exists or doesn't exist in this world? I don't know. So I put some question marks. Classism, definitely, because we've got the people in the service industry roles, we've got one of the main characters who was a doctor, we've got the woman who has enough time on her hands to have a Thursday outing, and I think, well, I'm making wild assumptions, but I think maybe the doctor would have been middle class. I think I saw that in a Wikipedia page. The main character woman and her husband, I think they were middle upper class. I don't know, but you get a sense, you know, classism exists. There's the people that are up here, there's the people that are here, there's the people down here, and you see how they interact with each other. You see the roles that they're in, you see their relationships, and it's fine and it's truthful, and that's how it exists in our world. So it exists in this world too. But it wasn't like a huge theme, or was it? It totally depends on your interpretation. You could see that as like one of the main themes. But I'd say the biggest theme was the romance and the love story. Not if you've never even seen A Brief Encounter, it's a love story. I'm gonna butcher it. There's a love story. There's like a man and a woman, and there's a man and a woman, and then this man and this woman go, and they have an affair, but they're in love with each other. That's basically that's like the biggest theme, and the other thing that I'm mentioning are just like the other bits. So next thing on my list, I didn't even finish this list before I started recording. I was just so excited to record. Ableism. So here's where I get to my notes. We have the lovely Lucy Elizabeth Thorburn, hope I said your name correctly, who played a character called Beryl. And I saw Lucy play a character in Kinky Boots at the New Wolsey, which was amazing, and it was really cool to see them in this as well. So Lucy is missing a hand, so adaptations had to be made, or were being made, in order to like carry trays a little bit better, carry bowls, different things like that. if this world, if within this world, ableism existed, I think the characters would have had a problem with Lucy, because that's how ableism works. Like if ableism exists, and that's your, like, well, it's normally like got phobia at the end, able phobia. That I just made that up. I think it doesn't work like that. If that existed in this world, that would have been a huge deal. It would have been like, oh my goodness, why are you holding the tray like that? There'd be slurs, there'd be all these different things. But of course not, because in this beautiful, wonderful, wholesome Gilmore Girls-esque world, ableism didn't exist. Ableism was not a thing. Everyone is equal. Everyone can move around as they like with whatever disabilities they have, or how they are disabled by the world with the, the social model disabilities. And that's fine and beautiful and wonderful, and how life should be. So we've got a world where sexism exists, but ableism doesn't exist. And we've got a world where classism does exist, but this is the huge but, and this is the most interesting thing to me that struck me when I watched this. And immediately as I was walking down the stairs, I went, oh my goodness, this now puts every play and every piece of fiction I've watched or read into total context as to why it never makes sense. I'm also autistic, so maybe that plays a part in it, but this is where we are. In a world where classism exists, this world, racism does not exist. Okay? So can you imagine a world in which racism doesn't exist, but classism does exist, sexism does exist, but what's the other one? Ableism doesn't exist. We don't know where we stand on homophobia and transphobia. Some of them are big parts of the society. Some of them are big parts of the society, and the language they use, and the jobs people have, and the relationships that are formed. And others don't even exist. Okay? And the reason I know racism doesn't exist, possibly, the two main characters are played by non-white people. A black man and a lady with a similar skin tone to me, maybe darker, actually darker than me, but you know, a light brown skin tone. And they're on stage initially, and I'm like, oh cool, you know. So it's always a nice little win when you see people like you on the stage. You're like, yay, cool, brilliant. And I was watching it, and it was fabulous. And I was like, isn't this lovely? Oh my God, how sweet is this play? How sweet is this storyline? Lovely, 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 lovely. And there are people in, I had this word earlier, service industry. There are people in service industry roles who are white, and there are middle class and upper class main characters who are black and brown. Okay? Amazing. What a world to be living in. Quite like to live in this world. Sounds fantastic. Probably won't ever live in that world, but hey ho, dreams, you know? So this beautiful world, my little thing again, this beautiful world, racism doesn't exist. Okay. But there's a really funny character who every so often would pop up to play a very particular waitress in this restaurant they kept going to. And it was a black woman. And I was like, oh, and it was such a characterful role. It was an amazing characterful role. But at the same time I was like, cool. But you then think about, okay, how many roles are there in the show? There's the main character who is upper class, the woman. There's the man who's like middle class. There's the wife of the man that doesn't exist. You know, just another woman. We don't need her in the play. And there's the man of the woman who does exist, because we need more men in the play. Yeah, joking, but no. And then some of the ensemble members play the children, and that's really funny. So the black woman that played the waitress, I don't know why I did that, because she also played other roles. That's why I was like, so when she's playing the waitress, I don't know if that makes sense. When she plays the waitress, I was like, why a black person? Why a black person playing a service industry person? Because that makes me think that racism exists in this world. But racism doesn't exist in the world, because we have two main characters going about their very middle and upper class life in, what I didn't say, 1945. Okay? Similar-ish. No, sorry, that's a lie. 1937, I think. But don't quote me. So don't quote me on the dates, but within at least 10, 20 years of Small Island. Small Island, the very truthful world that is very similar to the one that we live in, where racism does exist, classism, sexism. And we've got this new Wolsey Theatre version of Brief Encounter in 2023, where sexism, classism exist, but racism, and ableism doesn't exist. And I'm going through it in my head, but there's a black woman in a service industry role. Does racism exist? Does it not exist? Does racism exist in the creative process, but not in the world that we live in? I don't know. There's something else I was going to say that I forgot what it was that I was going to say. Okay, well, I'll just move on to something else. Maybe it'll come back to me. The thing that I struggle with the most is racism, classism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, ageism, everything is all like this in a big pie called society, and why we're all horrible to each other. Okay, that's what that pie is called. Catchy title. That's what I've named it. And you can't really have one without the other. Like, you can't really have racism without classism. It doesn't make sense. And you can't have classism without racism. And you can't have sexism without classism. I mean, maybe you can. I don't know. I'm not a professional, so, but these are my thoughts. And the other one I was going to say, you can't have homophobia without sexism. Definitely. I'm 90% confident about that one. So everyone's, ouch, that really hurt. Everyone's like this in the big society pie called Why We're All Horrible to Each Other. Yep, that's actually quite a mean title. Maybe the title is why we don't have a very big understanding of everyone else's experiences, and if someone else's experience is foreign to us, we act like it doesn't exist and we're more important. Maybe that's the title I was looking for. So if you're presented with a fictional world that you're watching, but you're offered this conflicting idea of, here is a world where racism and ableism doesn't exist, but sexism and classism does exist, but they all come from the same pie, and they all, this makes this happen, and this means your attitude is this, and this language is actually offending all these different groups of people. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense in my brain. And I'm like, is this because I'm autistic? Why does it make sense? No, it's not because I'm autistic. I'm just saying that because I like telling people I'm autistic. In case you weren't aware, I'm autistic and I've got ADHD. So I was watching it and so overcome with delight about how wonderful this play was, and I loved so much of it. And then I left and I was like, how come racism didn't exist? How does it not exist? I know what I was going to say earlier. Okay, so I'm not going to spoil the play in case you want to watch it. It's fabulous. You should definitely watch it. The guy, the main character guy, at one point or another says, I'm moving. Where to? Cape Town. Whoa! A place where black people exist. Okay. Oh my god, I said this in the car to my mum last night. It's not Cape Town. He said Joburg. Or did he say Johannesburg? Joburg. And I was like, ooh, interesting. Interesting for a couple of reasons. Number one, black people. Number two, you referenced a specific place in the place people refer to as the country of Africa, okay? You referenced a specific place. So in my head, I was like, ding, good job, thank you, well done, good reference. What, you can't just say, oh, I'm moving to Africa, because it's like, where are you going? Where are you going? You need to pack different things. You need to learn different languages. And you're going to hang out with different people. So tell me where you're going. He said he's going to Johannesburg, and I was like, oh my god, sick. Good job for knowing where you're going. Because just generally, in fiction, no one's specific about where in Africa they're going. They're just going to the country of Africa, okay? So that's a big bugbear for me. And this was amazing. In Ipswich as well, to see people being specific. And I think it was in the original play as well, because my mum was reading it on Wiki last night. So then later on, the other main character, the woman character, went, oh, something like, oh, do you have to go to Africa? And I was like, ugh, come on, man. Come on. But if she heard Johannesburg and jumped to Africa, she made that connection, then they must know in this world that Africa exists. And they must know the type of people that come from Africa. So were these people pretending to be white people? And it was colourblind casting? But the characters themselves are inherently white, but they were just played by black and brown performers. Is that what happened? I don't know. But I was curious. I was so curious. Because I don't have an answer. And I don't know if there is an answer, because so many things come into play when you're creating a play. Yeah, you heard. Fine. So things that come into it are the original text, the story that you want to tell, the performers that you have chosen to be a part of the show, any unconscious biases that you have whilst casting the show, because they're there. It was a choice to have those two people, and I should name them. Sorry, I'm being so rude. I did write their names down, and now I can't read my handwriting. So Alec, the guy, I don't know, you can't see. Is that a J? Do you know what? I'll just get it up on my phone. So, oh, why did I do this, man? I can't tell if that's a J or a Y. Okay, well, I'll keep talking while I find it out. But no matter how hard you try in a casting process, there's going to be unconscious bias, and there's going to be reasons you choose certain people over other people. And contrary to popular belief, unconscious bias is not just racism, it's not just white v black. Unconscious bias goes for everything, all the things I said, and many, many more. It's just a thing that exists. If you want to learn about it, Don't ask me because I'm not so good at it. But it's a thing that exists for everyone. Who's who? Meet the cast and creatives. Scrolly, scrolly, scroll. So the woman that played Laura was Hanora Carmen, and it was a J. Jamie Kasongo played Doctor Alec Harvey. Okay. Sorry, I've been speaking about them for so long without naming them. So these two people who were chosen, who are the best to perform this role. And I agree. I agree. I was watching them and I was like, oh, it's amazing, beautiful, delightful, and melanin, you know? And you can never be sad when there's melanin on stage, in my opinion, because there's not enough of it, okay? Cool. So, yeah, that's basically my thoughts on it. I don't know if I missed any of my points. Small Island, Aladdin, ableism. I think I've touched every base. So I want to know what you think about what I've said, if I've explained it explicitly. Can a fictional world exist where classism exists but racism doesn't, because they're so mixed up? They've been baked together in the societal pie called, I don't know what I called it earlier. You know? Can a fictional world exist with one but not the other? With sexism but no ableism? Can it exist? And if you think it can exist, have you seen it before? Has there been like a piece of fiction that you've seen that has, you know, or have you seen a piece of fiction that has had like all of the, what are they called? Like, I'm so bad with language. Like, not protected characteristics, but all the possible ways you could be like an awful person, right? All the discriminatory language, and so I'm getting distracted by what's going outside. All the ways you can use discriminatory language and power dynamics and societal structures to protect those that feel they're deserving of being protected. Is there a world in which all those exist and you're like, yeah, I buy into this? I feel like Small World does that. It's this world is very similar to the world that we currently live in. All the things in the pie exist in the real world and existed in the world of Small Island, and I buy it. In Aladdin, like, there's magic, so already you're like, whoa, okay, there's magic, there's time travel. Sometimes there's no gravity, you know. Maybe sexism exists, but maybe ableism doesn't. Maybe racism doesn't exist. I don't know, but there's magic. Oopsie, my camera got full. See, this is why I'm able to record so many lovely Rosy May Uncut episodes, by using my voice note, because it doesn't matter if my camera's full or not. I don't know where I got to, so I'll just round it off now. Thank you so much for listening and watching and joining in the channel. If you've got anything you'd like to share in the comments, please feel free. Anything you'd like to share in my DMs, or any voice notes that you'd like to feature in a future episode, I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions, so please send them along. Oh, it's a true Rosy May Uncut episode, because I'm just pausing and thinking about what I want to say next. I would absolutely, oh, that's what I'm going to say. I would absolutely recommend that you get a chance to see some of the amazing work that the New Wolsey do in Ipswich. They also create work that tours around different parts of the country, and yeah, I couldn't tell you how many of their productions I've seen, but I've seen quite a few. And I'm not biased because I used to work there. I used to watch their work before I started working there. But yeah, really brilliant theatre, don't know what the word is, theatre company, theatre, really brilliant organisation, so definitely check them out. And that's pretty much it from me. All I'll say is my new show, I'm working on it right now, is called Rosy May Finding Joy, and it's going to be shown, it's going to be performed for the first time
in October. More details coming soon. But keep an eye on my social media and my YouTube, and just like come around my house, knock on the door and ask what I'm doing, you know. No, please don't do that. Please. Please, Joe won't like it. Okay. Right. Sending lots of love to everyone. I hope you have a fabulous day, and see you later.